You're listening to Release Your Resistance with Bex Beltran, episode 75. Welcome to Release Your Resistance. This is Bex. The only reason why any of us don't have what we want in life is because of our own resistance. Right now, I'm learning how to recognize and release my resistance, and this podcast tells you how you can release your resistance so that you can live the exact life that you want. Let's get started. Ever since last week's Love to Learn episode, I have been thinking about different ways that people do learn. Do you know that people have different learning styles? Some people are visual learners. That's me. I love to see graphics and pictures, and I really like to take notes while I learn. And some people are auditory learners. Maybe this is you. Maybe this is why a podcast is such a great way for you to learn new things. And some people are kinesthetic learners. They learn by doing. They learn with motion and movement and action. And as I was thinking about kinesthetic learning, I remembered one way to take in new information is to incorporate movement and action when you want to learn or remember something. In fact, back in my corporate training days, when we outsourced to a sales training company, they came in and they had this whole learning technique where they were teaching our employees a new process that everyone was supposed to adopt. And the sales training company actually had gestures set up for every step of the process, almost like a chant with motion. And it was a very unique way to teach and to learn something. And it was very memorable. And it did get a few laughs, of course, because we looked like we were doing group synchronized charades. And all of this got me thinking about how I would teach someone the 5-step process that I use in my coaching and in my own self-coaching. And how would I teach these steps with actions or gestures? And that's what got me into the idea of this episode of motion and the model. Whenever I have a new topic and whenever I'm thinking about what vocabulary or what specific words I want to choose, I frequently look up the words that I'm thinking about so that I can make sure that I'm using them correctly or to confirm that I do understand what the word actually means, because sometimes we use words incorrectly or we use words not realizing they mean something slightly different than how we've been using them. So I looked up motion, and the very first few definitions that I found were all about physics, and I was not expecting that. According to Google, motion is the phenomenon in which an object changes its position over time. Motion is mathematically described in terms of displacement, distance, velocity, acceleration, speed, and time. And I love this physics definition, even though it doesn't exactly refer to what I am talking about, because using the model has changed me over time. It has caused me to change my outlook or my position, and it has caused me to displace thoughts that don't help me. So interesting, right? So today's episode requires you to use motion, specifically your hands. No, it's not required, only if you want. And if you're driving or holding something, maybe you just use one hand as you listen now, or don't use your hands at all and just imagine the motions as I describe them. And when I say the model, because this is motion and the model, I am referring to it so casually as if we're all on the same page and we all know what I'm talking about. But just as a quick refresher, when I say the model, I am referring to the coaching framework that I use on myself when I journal and when I do my own mental self-coaching, and it is the coaching framework that I use with my coaching clients. And I love the simplicity of it. I love that it is so universal. I love that anything can be plugged into it. The model really gives us a way to separate and dissect what we're thinking, how we're feeling, what we're doing or not doing. And then it lets us see what results we are getting. I have an episode about the model where I explain how and why I use the model with an example of it from early last year. And now is the perfect time to revisit this topic and dive a little bit deeper in and teach it to you again, or refresh your memory or your understanding of the model with some motion so that you can mentally or maybe even actually physically practice it. And I also want to share an example that popped up this week as I was talking about it and teaching the motions. The model is an acronym, CTFAR. And each of the letters stands for one element of the framework. So C is about the circumstance. T is about the thought. F is about the feeling. A is for the action or inaction. And the R is the result. So let me tell you what each of these mean, and then I'll tell you the corresponding motion that you can use to act it out along if you have a free hand, or if it won't hurt anything if you wave and move your arms around and make hand gestures along with me. The first part of the model is about reality. It's about noticing what is actually happening. And hopefully you heard the emphasis when I said is. It's like all caps and maybe bold. Is. This is what is happening. When we talk about reality, put your hands up above your head with your palms facing each other, but not clapped together. And then open your arms in an arching way coming down. It's almost like you're outlining a rainbow over your head. So this is the motion that I use to describe reality. It's like, okay, this is what's happening. It's what's all around us. It's what everyone can see. There is no disputing reality. There's no arguing with reality. Although, of course, sometimes we try to argue against reality without much success. So reality means everyone can see it and agree to it. There's just no question. It's also neutral. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is reality. The next one is the motion for what I am making reality mean. It's what I am thinking about what is happening. It's the sentence in my mind. And since it's like a sentence that my brain is telling me, I use air quotes. To do this motion, use 2 fingers on each hand. You have them up on each side of your face, parallel kind of to your eyes, and you curl your fingers down and then back up. Down and then back up at the same time. You do that a few times to make air quotes. Hopefully you're doing this with me right now. It is very fun. And hopefully you recognize what I mean when I say air quotes. And really, this is kind of just a way of saying that's your thought. That's what you think. That's what you are saying, but it's not necessarily reality. And I think sometimes, like in conversation, we use air quotes to mean apparently when we don't necessarily agree with what we're quoting that maybe somebody else has said. So whatever thought you have about reality, that's what you think, but everyone wouldn't necessarily agree with it. So that's why it gets air quotes. The next motion is for how I am feeling. For feeling, I put both of my hands, one on top of the other, with my palms flat against my body, on my chest. If you were to demonstrate a strong feeling about something, you might put your hand on your chest, right? To demonstrate that you feel something. So try it right now. Maybe you can even feel your heartbeat, or you can feel your breath going up and down in your chest. And then, if necessary, you could even slide your hands maybe outwards towards your arms so that you have your hands crossed over onto your upper arms, or maybe even onto your shoulders. So it's almost like you're giving yourself a little hug, which goes along with feelings. And this is a good opportunity to take a breath. When I ask myself, what am I feeling? I instinctively close my eyes and exhale while I go inward to really scan my body and to notice, what am I feeling? Sometimes I just notice a sensation first, like tight. I feel tight, or I feel heavy. But sometimes I can immediately say the name of an emotion, like I feel sad or I feel angry. And sometimes I'll ask someone, so what's the feeling? And they'll say another sentence. Maybe they'll say, well, I'm feeling she shouldn't have done that. Okay, so that's another air quote sentence, a thought. She shouldn't have done that. Then I'll ask again. Okay, so how do you feel when you think she shouldn't have done that? Maybe scared or hurt or whatever is the feeling that comes up with that thought. The feeling should usually just be one word, an emotion. And if you aren't able to come up with the emotion at this point, you just know it's not good. Maybe the feeling is bad or terrible. Okay, we can get a little bit more specific and descriptive. And maybe as you check in more with your body and as you deepen into that feeling and allow it to be there instead of resisting it. But really, if the feeling really is just simply bad, we can work with that and move on to the next motion in the model. So far, we've done 3 of the gestures. Do them again with me if your hands are available. We've done the rainbow gesture, which represents reality. We've done the air quotes gesture, which represents what you are making it mean. And we've done the feeling gesture, which is just your hands on your chest. Maybe your eyes are closed and maybe you're tuning into your own body to notice the emotion that you are feeling. The 4th gesture is actually 4 in 1. You make a cross or a plus sign right in front of your chest. You have one hand going straight up and down, and the other hand is perpendicular to it, crossing it in the middle so that the 2 hands look like a plus sign. And this represents the action grid. If you look at the plus sign, you have 4 different corners or 4 different sections in that action grid. And this motion reminds you to think of 4 different things, what you do and what you don't do, both internally and externally. You're going to think of what do you do while you're feeling this emotion, and also what don't you do while you're feeling this emotion that you would normally do in other circumstances. This part of the model is asking, how do you show up? If I were watching you on a video camera or from a distance, this is what I would see you doing and also what you wouldn't be doing. Would I see you smiling? Would I see you hanging your head down? Would I see you talking with other people? Or would I see you not talking to anyone? Would I see you hiding and retreating? The 2 parts of the external, or how you're showing up, is what you do and then what you don't do externally. Then we go internal. What is happening in your head? That's the other part of the action grid. We're looking for what you do and don't do internally. So, do you think of other options? Do you give grace? Do you think of more problems? Maybe you don't remember that the situation is temporary. Maybe you don't remind yourself that there are plenty of solutions here. Maybe you don't give someone else the benefit of the doubt. These are all examples of things that you do and don't do that I wouldn't be able to see because it's all happening inside of your head. So now we are starting to get some awareness. We are making a list of actions that you do or don't do because of how you are feeling, because of what you are thinking. And this brings us to the final motion of the model, which is your hands both open, palms up, almost like you're serving something on a tray. And what you are serving is your results. These are the results that you get from doing the things that you do and not doing the things that you don't do, both internally and externally. It's what you create for yourself with your actions. And that is the entire model all acted out in motion. And earlier this week, I was describing these motions and the model to a few different people, and I asked for an example from someone in the group. I put her on the spot a little bit, and I said, hey, just tell me about, something that you've been thinking about recently, either good or bad. Just tell me something that's been on your mind. And she said, well, I just got fired. What? Okay, that's a strong, interesting example to use. But yes, let's plug it into the model so that we can see what results are created from thinking the thought, I got fired. Now, just pause here and notice. Some people might say, well, I got fired is a fact. It is reality that everyone would agree with. But I also just want to give the reminder and the encouragement that it is okay, always okay, to dig deeper and really check to see if something is a sentence in your brain in air quotes, or if it is a neutral fact that is part of reality, that rainbow, right? So reality is what everyone sees and agrees on. It doesn't have any adjectives or any charged language. It is a neutral description of the actual event or the actual thing that happened. And when I probed a little deeper into what had happened in this real life example, it turns out she's a service provider and a client who she was working with decided to discontinue their working relationship. That is the reality. If we ask this client, hey, did you decide to discontinue the relationship? She would say, yes, I did. And if we ask my volunteer for this real life example, hey, did your client decide to discontinue the relationship? Yes. Everyone would agree on it, and it's not charged. It's not good or bad. It's just completely neutral. It's just the bare bones of what happened. But when I asked the volunteer in this description what was on her mind, she gave the thought, and I'm adding the air quotes, I got fired. When you think of someone getting fired, or when you think, ooh, what if you got fired or someone you love got fired, what emotion would that bring up for you? Now we can put our hands on our chest as the next motion and the next part of the model. We can all probably imagine different reactions or different emotions to thinking the thought, I got fired. But the one that came up in this example was that she felt rejected. Yeah, it makes sense. If you're thinking, in air quotes, I got fired, or of course, a feeling that could go along with that thought is rejection. So now we have our one-word emotion, rejection. And now let's go back to the action grid. But before we do, I just want to acknowledge that humans are complex, our brains are sophisticated, and we have the ability to think multiple thoughts at once and to feel lots of emotions simultaneously. And I point this out to remind you to stay in one specific model at a time. You can do as many models as you want about any given situation to get awareness around all the various thoughts and feelings and actions. But to use the model most effectively, do each model on its own for each individual thought. So back to our example where the volunteer started talking about all the things that she did after finding out that she would no longer be working with that client. We narrowed it down and we got very specific to only ask about what she did and didn't do while she was feeling rejected because she was thinking, I got fired. First, I asked, what would I have been able to see, either on like a camera or if I was sitting across the room? What actions would I be able to see? And she's feeling rejected, so she's going to withdraw. She's not going to put herself out there. She's not going to be her normal upbeat self. So those are the not things, or things that she doesn't do. She doesn't smile. She doesn't reach out to other people. She doesn't approach new clients and new possible business relationships while she is feeling rejected. Those are the things that we can see. The second half of the action grid is about what she does and doesn't do internally, the things that we can't see but are definitely happening in the brain. And the things that she's doing are that she's feeling sorry for herself. She's blaming the client. She's playing the situation over and over and replaying it in her mind, kind of like spinning on it. What is she not doing? She's not dropping it. She's not moving on. She's not thinking of other possibilities. And all of these actions and inactions are all because she is feeling rejected. And the reason why she's feeling rejected is not because the client decided to discontinue the relationship. No. The reason why she's feeling rejected is because she is thinking the thought, in air quotes, I just got fired. So let's review the complete model. We talked about reality. The client discontinued the relationship. We talked about the air quotes, what she made that mean. I just got fired. Her feeling is rejected. Then we talked about what she's doing and not doing, both internally and externally. And as we list out all of those actions and inactions, we can start to notice what is created when you don't put yourself out there, you don't smile, you don't seek out new business, you retreat, you spin on what happened, you blame your clients for their decision. What happens when you do or don't do all of those things? What do you create for yourself? In a way, we could summarize a little bit and say you cut yourself off from other clients because you're not putting yourself out there. You're not being hopeful. You're not seeing possible business relationships. So you cut yourself off from other possible clients. Wow. So the original thought in air quotes was, I just got fired. And the result that she creates when we go through that model is I cut myself off from clients. Very good to know, because that reminds her that the results are in her power. She has power here. I'm not saying that she can reverse time and have the power over the client's decision not to end the relationship. It might feel like the client had the power in this situation because the client is the one who chose to end the relationship. But really, the feeling of rejection came from her thought, I got fired. The action stemming from that feeling of rejection and then the result of cutting herself off from other possible clients is all based on the thought, I just got fired. And she has so many options to think when a client ends a relationship. She could think, I just got fired. But she could also think, okay, I accept the client's decision. She could also think, we were not a good fit. She could also think, wow, this frees up my time to work with someone who is a better fit. There's so many different things she could think when a client ends a relationship. If she chooses to think, for example, this frees up my time, then when she checks in with herself, she may notice that her feeling is relief, or maybe it's acceptance or hopeful or openness. What would the action grid look like coming from acceptance or hope? We might see her doing things like reaching out to other clients, making a new marketing plan. And internally, she might be noticing this valuable lesson that she has just learned. Internally, what she wouldn't be doing is spinning on the last conversation with the previous client. Don't you love how this self-awareness, by plugging the situation into the model and then using the fun motions, can remind you to be intentional about your thinking? I love how it reminds me that something my brain thinks is 100% fact is usually an optional thought that I can choose to continue thinking or just drop or replace with something more helpful. And I love using motions to remember the model because you can start anywhere with the motions. So if you catch yourself thinking, oh, why do I do this all the time? Do is an action, so it goes in the action grid. Then you can work backwards from there. Okay, well, how am I feeling that's making me do this? Or another example, if you catch yourself thinking something and you notice that sentence that you're thinking, remember to put it in air quotes to designate to yourself, you know, that's what you are saying. It is a sentence in your mind. And again, from that place, you can go backwards or forwards. Either find the neutral situation, the reality that doesn't have any descriptors or any charged language that everyone would agree with. And even just defining that neutral situation can be so helpful. Or you could go to the next gesture, the hands on your chest, to notice how you feel when you think that thought in air quotes. And then just keep going through the rest of the motions to see what results are created when you do think that thought in air quotes. And one last fun comment about motions before we wrap up today. I just said going through the motions, which is a common expression, and usually it describes when we do something rotely without thinking about it, going through the motions. But now you have specific motions to go through that will encourage you to pause, slow down, and get intentional about what you are thinking, feeling, doing, and creating. So moving forward, I really hope you do decide to go through the motions all the time. I give you full permission and encouragement to do this in public and around other people. Who cares how you look? Let them think and wonder what they will. You will know the benefit of what you're doing and why, and it will probably be fun, and it could lead to some really interesting conversations. So, let me know what you think. Do you have any resistance to doing the motions as you do the model? Do you have any questions about anything that I shared today? Leave me a note in the comments at bexby.org/motion, MOTION, or send me an email at hi@bexby.org. Thank you so much for listening today. Happy motioning, and I will talk to you next week. This has been Release Your Resistance. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, think about someone who you know who would love this episode and share it with them. There should be a share button on your app if you're listening to this on your phone. If you'd like to continue this conversation one-on-one or in real time, come visit me on my site at bexby.org to see how we can work together.